You've got questions? Well, I've got answers. Hi, my name is Sarah, and my channel is Knotty Gnome Crafts. Welcome. My channel is all about sewing and styling a handmade wardrobe. I asked my Instagram and YouTube followers to submit any questions that they might have for me, and today I'm here to answer them. And fair warning, there may be a little bit of a rant coming up, but I'm going to save that for the end. Let's just get to the question. The first series of questions I'm going to group together because they're all basically the same theme. How did I start sewing and why did I start sewing? When I was a little girl, my mom made a lot of my clothes, so I grew up around sewing. And once I reached a certain age, she allowed me to help her with certain steps in the process. Like eventually, I cut out the fabrics, and my mom would even let me sit at the sewing machine and sew some of the straight seams. But I wouldn't say that I really learned how to sew from her, but I was familiar with the process. Like I knew how a sewing machine worked, and I knew about basic garment construction, but I didn't follow pattern directions or anything like that. I was just sort of more around sewing. So when I actually learned to sew was in 2005. After I had graduated from college, I found that I had a lot of time on my hands and I felt like I needed a hobby. So I took up knitting. And I absolutely loved knitting, but a couple years in, I was still feeling like I had room in my life for a second hobby. So I went to my local Walmart and I picked up a really crappy $100 Singer sewing machine and brought it home with me. And the very first project that I ever completed on that machine was pillow shams, which I'm not going to go into detail about because it's super boring, it's pillow shams, you don't care. But after I made those pillow shams, I think the next few projects that I did were probably things like altering or refashioning clothes that I already had. And then eventually I did go ahead and start garment sewing. Now, I don't want to give the impression that I've been sewing my own clothes since 2005 continuously, because I actually went through several periods in my life of many years where I did not sew. I think the general trend was I'd be sewing my own clothes, I'd be really into it, and then eventually I would kind of get discouraged because especially in those early years, I was really focused on the product. So I was one of those people that would be like, I want to sew up this top to wear it tonight. And so I'd whip out a top in a couple of hours. And it just wasn't a very good quality, as you could imagine. Back then, I did not have access to the best materials, so maybe I wasn't using the nicest fabrics. And eventually that would all kind of wear me down, and I would think to myself, I'm not even producing clothing that looks as good as ready to wear, so I might as well just buy ready to wear. And then I would kind of throw in the towel for a little bit and just go back to buying ready to wear. And then at some point, the garment sewing bug would come back and it would bite me again, and then I'd be super into it again. So I don't know exactly how many of those phases I've had in my life, but I want to say there's been 3 or 4 of them. The most recent one actually started in 2020 during the pandemic. I once again found myself with too much time on my hands, so I decided to take up garment sewing again. The reason I feel like this time is going to be different from all those other times is because I have finally learned to slow myself down, to learn more about techniques, to learn more about fitting, and I'm actually finally reaching that point where I feel like the clothes that I produce for myself are better, they fit better, and they're better quality than what I can buy and ready to wear. So that's why I feel like I'm going to stick with it this time. Although who knows, maybe next year this time I'll be into underwater basket weaving and you'll never hear from me again. Now, as to why I started sewing my own clothes, that's super easy, because ready-to-wear clothes do not fit me. If you are not new to my channel, you're probably tired of me saying this, and believe me, I'm kind of tired of living it, but I am 4'9". And I know that people acknowledge that that number is short, but I feel like sometimes when I'm on camera and I just am not really around other people for scale, maybe you don't get the full extent of it, but 4'9" is really short. It is shorter by far than even an average petite woman. So nothing in the stores fits me. I always have to make length adjustments on my patterns. That's just part of my life. And if I want to get a good fit, I have to make my own clothes. I don't have any other choice. So now that we've covered these basics about how I got started on my sewing journey, let's get to the other questions. Do I prefer indie or Big Four? Now this is an interesting one because before this year, I would have said that I liked them both equally. When I started sewing, I started with the Big Four because when I was growing up, that's what my mom used. That was the only thing that was available, and that's all that she knew. So that's what I knew. I went to Joann's and I got some patterns out of the drawer and I started sewing with them. But right around that time was the very beginning of the indie designer market. I mean, places like Grainline Studio and Colette at the time were kind of coming onto the scene. Being someone who was on the internet at that time, I found a lot of these companies and I really liked the idea of indie sewing. So I kind of dabbled in both pretty equally up until this year. Now, I have noticed this year that I've been sewing more and more indie patterns and fewer Big Four patterns. And I have to say that I am not one of those people who thinks that Big Four patterns are bad or doesn't like the instructions. I think that they're perfectly adequate. I think that Big Four patterns fit me, sometimes even a little bit better than some indie companies. But I think the reason why I'm not gravitating to Big Four patterns as much this year is all about social media. So when I'm on Instagram or watching a YouTube video, often I will see what my peers are making and I will fall in love with whatever the hot pattern of the month is and I want to make that pattern. And most of the time, whatever's hot right now is often an indie pattern. I'm not saying that Big Four patterns can't go viral, but it just seems a little bit less likely. I don't see that happen as much. So I think purely for those reasons, I have ended up sewing more indie patterns than I have Big Four. I still say I don't have a clear preference for one over the other, but the results sort of speak for themselves. I do sew with more indie now than I have with Big Four. Next question, knits or wovens? So I feel like my answer for this is probably pretty similar to a lot of people's answers. I really like to sew with wovens, but I actually probably wear knits a little bit more. I have a pretty casual, laid-back lifestyle, and so I get a lot of wear out of my knits. I just find them to be more comfortable. So in reality, I should probably actually make more knits than I do, but I do really enjoy sewing wovens. There's just something about the process of sitting down to make a shirt or a pair of pants that I just really enjoy. And I just don't get that same feeling of satisfaction when I sew knits. So I guess if we're talking about preferring one over the other, I'm going to say wovens, but I really do wear knits more. Next question. What is my favorite part of the sewing process and what is my least favorite? Well, I can tell you what my least favorite part is immediately, and that is tracing. I hate tracing. I hate it so much that I will avoid it whenever possible. There are only a couple of very small instances where I will bite the bullet and trace. One of them is if I end up with a paper pattern from an indie designer. Those patterns often cost more, they're like $20 to $25. And if I'm gonna be spending that kind of money on a pattern, I will go ahead and trace it just in case I want to make another size at some point or make the garment for someone else. And I'm not wasting my money by cutting straight into the pattern. If I have an out of print or vintage pattern that I want to preserve, I will also go ahead and trace. But for the most part, I will do whatever I can to avoid tracing. And it's kind of a shame because I have a big backlog of Berta magazines that have some really cute designs in them, but I basically never use those patterns because I just hate tracing that much. Now for my favorite part of the sewing process, it's the sewing. I think probably like a lot of people. So once you've cut out your fabric and made all of your markings, and ironed on your interfacing and you're finally ready to sew, that's the part that's really fun, right? And specifically, I think parts that I really enjoy, I like to do a lot of top stitching or stitching in the ditch. Those kinds of skills where you have to be both really focused, but also kind of zoned out at the same time. I find that I can get into this almost Zen state where I'm just sort of feeling it as I go, and I really enjoy that feeling, so that's my favorite part of the sewing process. I think this next question is asking me if there are two similar patterns, if I'll buy them both or if I'll just hack them. I'm not a pattern hacker. I can do simple things, but it's not something that I enjoy. The reason that I don't really enjoy hacking is because you're not always going to get it right on the first try. It might take a little bit of time and fabric, and you might have to do a few iterations before you get it just the way that you want it. I would rather spend that time and money and just pay someone else to do it for me so that I don't have to do it, because I just find that kind of frustrating. So if I have the option, I'll pretty much always just buy the other pattern rather than doing a hack, unless it's just something very specific that I'm looking for that I can't find anywhere else, or it's just a super easy hack like adding a ruffle to the bottom of something or something that anybody could do. For the most part, I avoid hacking because it's just not something that I like. Next question, which of my machines gets the most use and why? So full disclosure here, I don't really understand this question because, so I have a sewing machine and I have a serger and I have a cover stitch, but isn't the answer always going to be your regular sewing machine? A sewing machine, you can make anything on it. You can sew with knits, you can finish your seams. The other two machines have more of a specialty purpose. And I know that maybe some people use their serger and their cover stitch more than I do. I mostly just use my serger to finish seams or do rolled hems sometimes. And my cover stitch, I exclusively use that just to hem knits and nothing else. Maybe if you had a business where you were making a lot of knits, then you might use those machines more than you use your regular sewing machine. But I would think that for any sort of conventional home sewist, that you're gonna use your normal sewing machine more than anything else. I'm actually really intrigued by this. Let me know in the comments if you are someone who uses your other machines more than your regular sewing machine, because I would never even think that that would happen to anybody. Let me know. Next question. What do I think about the Big Four changes? So first of all, I kind of am aware of some changes. I saw some things on social media that I think they're bringing in some partnerships with other designers, but I think that was literally just announced and it's not coming out yet. So I'm going to reserve judgment on that until it actually happens, because I can't really prejudge something before I actually see the patterns. But I guess it sounds like a good idea. I am always in favor of more size inclusiveness, so I think that it is wonderful that they are expanding their sizing. And I imagine that it's sort of a progression, and so maybe they'll do even more and more. I guess my only quibble about it at the moment is that in their current collections, they don't do it for every pattern. And I do find that a little bit mind-boggling that it's only a selection and not everything. I do hope that they continue with this and that they do it for everything, because I think that that would be the most optimal situation for everyone, for the customers and the company. But I do applaud them for making those changes, and they are definitely way overdue. So this next one is technically not a question, but okay, we'll let it go. It's asking me to please show my closet and clothes storage. So I'm not going to do that in this video, but I was thinking about filming my wardrobe switchover. It's pretty much time for me to change out my closet, where I put away my summer clothes and get out my fall clothes and kind of go through everything and see what doesn't fit, what needs to be altered, what I want to get rid of. And I was thinking about making a video about that process. Please let me know in the comments if that is something that you would like to see, and if I get enough response, then maybe I'll film that. But yeah, I don't really feel like I'm in a place right now to just show you, because my wardrobe's kind of in a state of transition, but that is something that I could bring you in the future. So this next question, I think we kind of covered the first part of it in the how I started sewing portion, but this person is asking about common pattern adjustments that I always make. So I always have to make length adjustments. Any kind of clothing that is meant to cover your arms or cover your legs, I have to do a length adjustment. I don't have any choice. So when I make those adjustments, I usually just use the lengthen shorten line if there is one. And if there's not a lengthen shorten line, I try to adjust in the place where I feel like I need the adjustment. So for instance, my arm is really short, but my arm is super short from my elbow to my wrist, but it's only a little bit short from my shoulder to my elbow. So if I had a long sleeve, for example, I might take, like half an inch out of this top portion and then like 2 inches out of the bottom portion, just to kind of keep things proportional to my own body. That's what I try to do. Now, in terms of other types of adjustments, I have some common adjustments that I usually need to make, but I'm not at a stage where I have enough experience that it's like I always need to do this or that. Like for example, I often need a small bust adjustment, but depending on the style or the pattern or the size that I'm using, I don't always do it. And I feel like that's probably just, it's not my lack of experience. I feel like that's always the case because different pattern companies, they have different blocks as starting points. There's different types of designs that have more ease or less ease. So I just feel like a little bit skeptical when somebody's like, I always need to do a forward shoulder adjustment or whatever it is that they're saying, because I just feel like, it's probably you mostly need to do that, but maybe you don't need to do it all the time. Also, I find that even if I do a small bust adjustment, I don't always do it in the exact same degree. Maybe sometimes it's half an inch and sometimes it's 2 inches. It just depends on the actual design and the fit of the pattern. So that is why I am learning that making a muslin is so important. Now, I do get a lot of questions sometimes from people wanting me to demonstrate how I make certain adjustments. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and tell you right now that I don't want to do that. And here's why. I am still really new to figuring out how to make garments that fit my body. I'm getting better at it every day, and I feel really good about how my clothes fit now as compared to how they fit when I started sewing in 2020. I've come a long way, but I am in no way an expert. And I certainly am not qualified to tell other people how they should be making adjustments, because I can't guarantee that whatever I do for my body is going to work for their bodies. So in my opinion, I prefer to leave that information to people who have more experience, people who teach, people who publish books. I don't think that you should be coming for that information to me. It's like when a brand new sewist starts a YouTube channel, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's exciting to see somebody come along on that journey. But you know how like you're watching a video and you hear them say something like, I never pre-wash my fabric and it works out fine for me. And internally you're just like screaming to yourself like, no, like don't tell people to do that. That's really bad advice. That's how I feel about the fitting. Like, I am just not in a place where my fitting where I feel qualified to tell other people what to do. And so that's why I will not be making any demonstration videos, at least not anytime in the near future, because I just don't even think that it's all that helpful because I don't know what I'm doing. So I hope that you can understand and respect that. Based on some of the comments that I've gotten on some of my other videos, I do think that for whatever reason, even when you say in the video itself, I'm learning, I don't really know if this is correct, you will still be treated as an authority in a way because it's on video. And I get lots and lots of questions. Anytime I've tried to do anything sort of relatively like that, I get so many questions about, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? And it's like, I don't know, guys. I just told you, like, this is how I do it, but I don't know if that's right or not. And so to avoid any and all of that, for the time being, I just do not see myself putting in a lot of time and effort to make those kinds of videos. I know that people really like that kind of thing, but like I said, I'm just going to leave it to the experts. So this was my very first Q&A video. I hope that you found it interesting and informative, and if you did, I would love it if you'd hit the like button so that I will know that you like this kind of content. I was actually a little bit surprised that I did not get any personal questions, but you know, maybe it's for the best because I don't have to sit here and tell you how boring my life actually is. If you like watching me try new things, I suggest you check out this video where I did my very first sew with me and probably my last. So I'm going to put this one on the end screen so you can check it out. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate that you take time out of your day to watch my videos, and I will see you again next time.